Thanks for joining us. My name is Ibrahim Sani. This is Notepad. Of course, we're looking at some of the items that will revolve around what will take place throughout the year. One of the items is, of course, the ability for us to improve regulation, ability for us to improve on regulatory framework, and how this will impact businesses and the economy at large. Joining us for today is Nija Amri Jemari, the Director of Business Execution of Southeast Asia for ROSEN Group in Asia Pacific. Nija, thanks for taking the time to speak with us and, of course, come over to the studio. Maybe we can go through with what ROSEN does first before we move into some other areas of concern pertaining to the company before we move on the other elements as well.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for having me today and giving the opportunity to introduce ourselves at the beginning, which is very important to make sure that the audience understand where we came from and what we are doing actually. ROSEN has been around in Malaysia for quite some time actually. This year we are going to celebrate our 30th anniversary, and our office in Kuala Lumpur is actually the hub and the headquarters to serve the Asia Pacific market. We have two other offices reporting to Kuala Lumpur, which is Perth in Australia and another one in Beijing for Greater China. And apart from that, we have several others operational offices around the region as well. We have another branch in Johor Bahru. We have offices in Brunei and also in Balikpapan, Indonesia to serve the market. Yeah. So what we do in terms of core business, people out there in the industry known us as inline inspection provider. But usually when I break the ice with anyone on the street is we are basically a partner or a consultant kind of thing to our customer, letting them know on the integrity of their asset, basically how good or bad and what they need to look into the future in terms of handling their assets.
Okay. What would be some of the concerns that you have right now when it comes to operating for 2023, and how is this different from the way you have been operating the previous years?
I mean, the main objective of pipeline safety is to have zero incidents. I think this is shared across the board, and what we need to do to address that actually. So there's a few facets into that, and the way we handle that from ROSEN perspective is to empower technology, because we see ourselves as inventor and we solve problems using capability in technologies. Second facet that we have in terms of our edge in solving those problems and issues are our competency and experience. Being so long in the market doing the niche services, we have been through a lot of challenges together with our customer, of course. So that's one part of the equation where you solve with technology and experience. Another part of it is policy making and ensuring that the industry goes along with you in terms of your ambitions and your journey towards that. So how we are having those conversations with the stakeholders, our customer, the regulator, to have the right mindset, the right culture moving forward, ensuring that pipeline remains safe and performance are at the highest standard, and lifespan of these assets are being pushed to the maximum.
You know, the sector that you're facing right now is quite interesting because while we have seen some slowdown in 2022 and 2021, it is expected to see a boom or growth for this year moving forward. Do you feel that you have the core competencies ready? Do you have the talent that is required in order for you to manage this kind of expected increase in terms of demand for the business for the year?
Yeah, I agree with you. However, based on our projection, we feel that this year we are still in that trajectory upwards, but not yet to the pre-pandemic level. So the way we gear ourselves in terms of that ability and agility to serve the market is to be able to tap resources within country and also within the region. Like I mentioned before, we have offices not only in Malaysia but several other locations nearby as well. So we can rely on these resources available at our fingertips. Another point to consider is the enhancement of technologies as well. So we have more and more innovation as we speak, to be able to do work more efficiently, faster and more accurate. Yeah? And all this boils down to how you want to make decision faster. Another important point at the end is also operational excellence on how you want to improve your processes in terms of documentation, steps. So when you do same task before, you need 10 different steps. Today, you find ways to reduce that into 5 steps. So this is another important innovation or improvement on how to be able to stay relevant in terms of the challenges in the market, delivering our solution.
Let's talk about the deliverables of solution. Do you feel that reliance on technology has to be intensified in this year moving forward, considering that we need to have lower reliance on, say, foreign workers and, of course, just general talent management, and, of course, perhaps lowering the cost of operations as well? Where do you stand in terms of improving your businesses using better technology and perhaps even artificial intelligence on serving your clients?
Yeah. I think you hit the right note there. We are dealing, especially in our niche segment in the industry, with big data and huge amount of information coming in, not only today, but accumulation of that data in the warehouse for the last 30 years, for example. So how we want to deal with this abundance of information and how we want to make quick and fast decision on that. So again, I go back to the technology facet of handling things. So I believe personally that this is an important part. And speaking on behalf of the customer, if I may cite, for example, Petronas also have out there innovation gateway, which they promote, innovation and creativity from the supply chain of their services, to be able to come with novel solution in terms of handling more complex and more demanding situation nowadays. So the energy mix and transition to a better tomorrow is also another topic of interest. For example, we are talking about cleaner energy, global warming. So transition from hydrocarbon into things like hydrogen or CO2 are also the buzzword in industry, and we are gearing towards that as well. Last quarter itself, we present a few papers on hydrogen in Australia on pipeline integrity space, and we are having a lot of discussion with stakeholders in country because in Malaysia there is more drive in CO2, for example. So these are the items that we have in hand in terms of feeding information where we see our journey will be towards the future and how to align with the stakeholders so that we are communicating and being transparent on what's next.
Okay, let's talk about the kind of actual solutioning that you have been using. Data abundance and data paralysis is a big problem in your industry, I presume. Do you feel that the ability for you to sieve through what data is important to be relayed back to your clients is much more important than trying to assess what data is being collected?
Yeah, okay. I think both have their merit in terms of importance. Number one, we keep on improving the way we are collecting data. When I start with ROSEN in the last century, we have
That's funny.
we have different sets of technologies, different resolution of sensors. Today, our best capability, we can have the pixel of 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. So what we have is equipment that are running through oil and gas pipeline and start to collect all this data, and the pixel are high resolutions. Yeah. So imagine if you have back then your TV box when you are small compared to the high definition TV that you have today. So the collection of data are more accurate. So back then, if we see with certain kind of range of accuracy, today that level of accuracy are being further reduced. The gap are smaller now. Yeah. So that's one in terms of collecting of the data. Secondly, is also about learning. Yeah. So machine learning is also another buzzword out there. So tapping into the capability of technology, so they can do things faster, repetitively more efficient compared to human beings, but they cannot still take the human nature and complexity of our brain out of the equation just yet. Okay. So how the technology or our approach in terms of teaching and imparting our knowledge to the machine to be able to canvas through new collected data with higher accuracy, looking back to the historical data of abundance and try to make conclusion on that. So the key part or the nice thing about that, in my opinion, is also to have the human interaction at the end. Be it on our side or our customer side, we still have engineers and scientists at the end of that line to be able to make that call. What is going to happen is they are now being supplied with faster, more accurate information and making a high level and quality decision compared to back then.
Okay, we'll go for one short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more with ROSEN Group. Thanks for staying on with us. I have with me in the studio Nija Amri Jemari, the Director of Business Execution of Southeast Asia for ROSEN Group in Asia Pacific. Nija, let's talk a little bit more about what to expect for 2023. The current state of pipeline safety in Malaysia and the future that it holds is actually quite important for us to explore before we move on to some other areas in the region. Let's talk about this particular area of concern, the current state of safety in pipeline control.
Yeah, I think pipeline is at status quo safe, and it's getting safer by the day. A report by API, American Petroleum Institute, states that in the past 5 years, we reduced the incidents related to pipelines, environment to people as well by 38%. So the commitment from the stakeholders out there are really high in terms of aiming to net zero incidents. But this requires a lot of effort in terms of having the right mindset and commitment, that's one. And then having the right safety culture in organization, that's two. And in terms of supporting that, how they learn from each other as well. Because as a pivot point, ROSEN work with multiple pipeline operators in country. Yeah? So we see a lot of good practice in between those organizations and how we want to bring those learning together and get the best practice from the whole community. Yeah? So that's another point. And looking forward, this is a journey. There is no finish line in terms of safety in pipeline. So we need to continue pushing on, being rigorous in terms of our safety requirement, the regulation that we are going to put out there, and how we want to tap into technology helping us in that journey. We need as well to have the strong commitment and contribution from the regulator and the government itself, because they are also important in that mix. And in Malaysia, it goes without saying, Petronas have the fingers in their pie in many decision making on other operators there out there as well. One of the movement or the change that I like coming into the scene is where Petronas start to have this pan-Malaysia group of services being put together. So what they did is they combine all the pipeline operator, what are their problems, putting together the scope of work required in this journey. And on the other side of the fence, who are the stakeholders in terms of providing these solutions to the operator and try to have some sort of standardization. Yeah? What are the minimum requirements to be able to fulfill this safety requirement?
Is this being shared across the region and across Asia Pacific, or do you feel that this is just quite interesting to be discussed at Malaysian level?
I think it goes even beyond the regional level. I mean, if you go to Middle East or North America and South America, they have similar ambition and push as well. But this movement I see is something that I would like to support and to cultivate more moving to the future, because I also feel that Malaysia, for example, have a lot to learn and offer to Thailand, to Vietnam, to Indonesia, and vice versa. There are some similarity. For example, mainly in this sector in Southeast Asia, we operate more than 50% offshore pipelines compared to if you go to China and Australia, where on the flip side they have onshore pipeline. So these two differences already offer different kind of problem and challenges. Yeah, so we can always compare note. For example, offshore lines, the hazardous situation out there in terms of temperature, mercury content in the pipeline, sand in the pipeline, or any debris in the pipeline that can cause damages over time into the pipeline. Where in terms of operating long, big size transmission line in onshore, I mean, for example, in Australia or in China, we do have those in Malaysia, of course, operated by Petronas Gas, for example. But I mean, the sets of problem are more prominent there in terms of different sets of challenge. For example, the recent one which is popular is geohazard. Whenever there are soil movement, whenever there are monsoon season, for example, and the environment around the pipeline itself are providing a threat to the pipeline. Yeah, so pipeline will always face internal threat and external threat as well. So how you operate internally, which is in your control, and what happens surrounds you is also a concern. We may have, for example, projects in the vicinity. For example, you have a new road, a new railroad construction, for example. So third-party damage are also a concern and need to be monitored along the way of the lifetime of the pipeline itself.
The geopolitical tensions around the world has actually brought some conversations to pipeline safety and pipeline security. The Nord Stream conversation is also quite important. Folk like me that might not necessarily be completely aware of what's happening now, other than the fact that whatever that we're reading on the news.
Yeah, of course.
How is this impacting the way you do your business when we see news like Nord Stream, pardon me, and of course the potential attacks by some actors? Russia has denied their involvement, but generally speaking, a lot of people believe it is Russia altogether. Do you feel that these kind of conversations might be impacting the way you do your business in this part of the world? Yeah,
okay. Maybe I focus on how we adapt and change to be able to remain relevant and be the right partner of choice. I mean, among the important idea coming out from that is how you can be on time on reacting and addressing the problem. Yeah, because incident can happen. If you mentioned about Nord Stream or any other incident, it can happen, but at that point of time is how fast you are acting and addressing the issue. Yeah, so how fast, how many days are you able to locate this problem, where it is, and what is the right solution, and do you have the right resources at place to be able to be deployed and suppress the issues. So this is where I think I go back to the example of geohazard. Yeah. So if we have historical information, we can have some predictive analysis. If there is going to be a problem, an incident in the pipeline, where are the hotspots? For example, if you have 500-kilometer pipeline from Sabah to Sarawak, for example, okay, where are the hotspots? Where could be the soil movement? Where the rainfall are high usually? So you define where are the hotspots. You may have 5 hotspots, for example, and then you start to think about and look into the composition of what are the internal threats and external threats. So if something wrong happened, is it a crack? Is it a leak? What kind of defects is going to be potentially there? In case of Nord Stream, it's a third-party damage could be. So then you start to be ready in terms of what kind of band-aid you need, if you like. You need a plaster, or you need a pipe spool spare repair. Do you need a team with what competency? So it's about how fast. I think the KPI for this scenario are, if something went wrong, can we solve within 12 hours, 48 hours, 1 week? So those are the improvement over time, so that something that is unavoidable, but you are reacting as fast as you can.
Okay, and with this in mind, let's talk about talent development, talent concerns that you might face for this year moving forward. Yeah. Do you feel that you have the necessary wherewithal to attract the necessary talents? Also, what's the situation with folks in your industry and the oil and gas industry at large? Is it a reality that they might face some form of retrenchment, so to speak, at a wider range of the oil and gas industry?
Yeah, okay. Maybe I can refocus based on our niche segment of the industry. Yeah, I mean, in inline inspection, this is a very niche market. I mean, you cannot go out there and find engineers or scientists that can immediately adapt to our needs. Yeah. So I start with that first before going to the industry at large. Yeah. So what we have as a standard, we have a competency standard worldwide. Yeah. You have level 1, level 2, level 3 based on, yeah, it's the same, and being standardized worldwide from the operator side and the service provider side. So it's upon the stakeholders to be able to comply to that. So usually in our case, it's a movement between one organization to another, but we know each other kind of thing because it's so niche, right? So if we bring a fresh talent into the pool, we need to spend time in terms of upskilling and gaining competency and experience. Yeah, before, I mean, if I hire a junior or a university leaver, I need at minimum maybe 12 to 18 months to be able to fulfill minimum requirement to be able to do some work. So yeah, I mean, in terms of,
I have to ask.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that limit the chances of these individuals in your sector to, I guess, transplant their skills elsewhere because of the super high niche training that you get from this industry?
That's right in a way, but on the flip side as well, you become the subject matter expert and you can grow to become somebody relevant in pipeline safety space. Yeah, I mean, one way of career development in this niche is to be very good technically on this particular subject, and then you start to move into broader spectrum in terms of pipeline safety, because you then will deal with pipeline engineers, corrosion engineers, petroleum engineers, and then you start to replicate those competency, and then you somehow become the subject matter expert. But given, I mean, people with 30, 40, 50 years in this are not many. We may have maybe one person in Asia Pacific and one person in North America. So the way we see it, it always revolves around 5 to 10 years in terms of moving forward within the organization or beyond the organization. And one example is, you start as a young engineers, you work into evaluating this, collecting data, for example, and then after 5 years, you move into engineering competency, because in the customer side, there are people who are receiving this information and they need to make decision based on this information. So you move next to that level. And usually my observation is the next step is moving into the leadership role already, maybe on the technical side. So those are the career options.
I cannot imagine a young child thinking of growing up to be a pipeline specialist engineer.
Yeah, it's
police, military maybe, I don't know, but a teacher, how did you end up in this job?
Maybe interesting story as well. I like what you mentioned. I never knew this job existed or this particular service even existed. I never knew we have an equipment that can travel inside the pipeline and came out on the other side and giving you data. So when I started, I was an electrical engineer back then, and I just grabbed this job because I feel it's interesting, because it's something that I don't know and I want to find out about it. So I spent the first 1/3 of my career journey here being the technical expert. I learned as much as I can. So I started with doing site works, launching and receiving this pig. They call them pig, but I always make joke with my Muslim friend, a pig that I can touch. Then after having some experience there, I start moving into assessing the data, because I had the curiosity of what actually that we are looking at. So I spent couple of years evaluating the data and then processing the data, sitting with a customer like what we have today, discussing what are the outcome, what are the findings, is it healthy or not. It's like when you go to a doctor,
prescriptive diagnostics,
yes,
and so on.
Something like that. So I start to gain more knowledge in terms of what actually the pain point of our customer. What are they looking for actually? Because the beginning, when I just launching this pig and receiving this pig, I just think about, okay, my job. Now I'm starting to think about why is it important to the other person. Then the second 2/3 of my life with Rosen is basically moving into sales and business development. I think it's a good move for me personally, and maybe the audience can relate as well, because you have the technical competency, and then you start to be able to engage the market more and develop the business. And today, the last third of my professional life is moving into the leadership role, knowing the details of how it works and what the market needs. So this is where I think my focus now more on developing new talents and then pushing the growth of the organization as well in the region.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
This has been a very interesting interview. I haven't, never in my life have interviewed a company like this before. That was our conversation with Nija Amri Jemari, the Director of Business Execution of Southeast Asia for ROSEN Group in Asia Pacific. It's always interesting to get interviews like this every now and then. Companies that might not necessarily be the run-of-the-mill, I suppose.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about ROSEN Group, just head on to their website and find out more about what they do. Of course, you can learn more about these kind of interviews on Astro AWANI and all our platforms. Until then, my name is Ibrahim Sani. Catch you in the next one.